Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. Today we're going to talk about how to prepare for and succeed at a Canadian RPAS flight review. Before I begin, I'll mention that the presentation material I show in this video is available in soft copy PDF form for a nominal fee. Please see the link in the description below. While I'm at it, I'll also mention that a number of people have used my Drone Pilot Canada mobile phone app during their flight reviews. The flight reviewers were impressed by the app, and it helped the candidates quickly identify nearby airports and easily meet the requirements for procedures and checklists. The Drone Pilot Canada app is available in both the Apple App Store and Google Play Store, and again, links are available in the description below the video. Okay, to prepare you for your flight review, I'm going to walk through 5 sections in this video. First one's going to cover the basics. Number 2, how to prepare. Number 3, what to actually bring to the test. Number 4, what you'd expect actually when you're taking the test. And lastly, some general tips for success. Let's go through them. What's a flight review anyways? Well, first of all, it's the final step to achieving your RPAS Advanced Operations certification. And it's a one-on-one personal test of your knowledge and skill in an actual flight situation. The focus of a flight review is to demonstrate your ability to fly safely. What are the steps towards your Advanced Operations Pilot certificate? Number 1, you will have passed the Advanced Operations Pilot exam. That was a doozy and a big step. Number 2 is this flight review. So you have to take the flight review with an official flight reviewer. There's a fee from the flight reviewer of somewhere between $200 and $400. It depends on the flight school that you're using, the location of the flight review, and a number of factors like that. You'll have to call around to find the actual price. And there is a 24-hour waiting period to retake the review if you happen to fail. But you're not going to. You're going to succeed. Third step is to actually apply to Transport Canada for your Advanced Operations Certificate after you've got your exam under your belt and the flight review. And sadly, there's a $25 fee for that certificate. I mentioned that you must use an official flight reviewer, but how do you find an official flight reviewer? Well, flight reviewers must be associated with a drone flight school. So, first option is to check the Find a Drone Flight School list on the Transport Canada Drone Safety website. Your second option is to check the list of flight reviewers that I've provided in the Drone Pilot Canada app. And if you mention that you found them in the app, you'll get a minimum 5% discount. Now that is a pretty good deal. Your third option? Well, simply Google Canadian Flight Reviewer for your area, and I'm sure you'll find some options that way. So how should you prepare for your flight review? First couple of steps that I would recommend are some reading. Well, the first one is actually watching a video. So number 1, be prepared with the terminology and nomenclature of the Advanced Operations exam in mind. You don't have to know everything like you did in the pilot exam, but you should be familiar with terminologies such as visual flight rules, the CFS, the Canadian Flight Supplement, things like that. And I would recommend as a fairly easy way to remind yourself and refresh this information is to watch my YouTube video, Study Guide for Advanced Operations Pilot Exam. The second item is actually a Transport Canada document. And I'm not recommending you read the whole document, just the appendix, Appendix A of TP 15395, Flight Reviewer's Guide for Pilots of Drones, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that appendix actually walks you through all the details of what to expect at a flight review. It's a little long, so if you don't want to read that, you're not gonna lose anything. But if you're interested in the details, they're all in that document right there. The third step I would recommend is that you ensure that you have written procedures for taking off, landing, and emergencies. You'll recall from the regulations that these are expectations, and at your flight review, they will check that you actually have these procedures in your hand. Now, they don't have to be written, they can be electronic, And if you've purchased either my Drone Pilot log in Excel format or the Drone Pilot Canada app, you will have already received written procedures that are perfectly usable right off the dock for all of those activities, taking off, landing, and for dealing with emergencies. Number 4, similarly, you need to ensure you have a written down pre-flight checklist. And again, if you've purchased the app or the pilot log Excel document, you will have a starter kit basically for that checklist. You may want to tune it, which you can do either in the Excel file or in the app. You can customize it for your own needs, but you need to have that pre-flight checklist, and that's where your site survey and things like that are also found, and you have to have it for your flight review. And you have to use it too, by the way. Number 5, have a simple, what they call in flight review world, mission in mind for your flight test. So they will ask you to do some specific things, but they'll also ask you to fly a mission. And if you're sitting there in a state of nervousness, as I'm sure you'll be when you do your flight review, you might not come up with something. So think about it in advance, and it doesn't have to be anything complicated. I'm going to take a picture of this house over here, or this barn, or this tree. And so you just have to be prepared to describe that to your flight reviewer, that you're going to take off, you're going to fly over to this house, and you're going to go around the back and take 3 pictures, come back and land. Simple as that. Doesn't have to be complicated. It really helps to have that in mind beforehand, though. Number 6, do a site survey for the location of the flight review prior to arriving. That way you will know where the nearby aerodromes are, the airports and heliports and things like that, if there are any. You'll know what airspace restrictions might be close by. You'll know about ground hazards. Do a little look on Google Earth if you're not familiar with the area, so that you'll know where there's tall buildings or towers or whatever. One interesting thing that I wasn't aware of originally is that you can actually have the flight review take place at a location of your choosing. Now you might have to pay extra for that, but I'll tell you, I always feel more comfortable flying where I have flown before, as opposed to going to some strange place, already being under a lot of stress and expected to fly there. Number 7, know exactly how to deal with emergencies and unexpected events. You will be expected to know how to set your return to home program, assuming that your drone has one, so that you can set an appropriate altitude to come back and that sort of information in your app on your phone for flying your drone. You need to know how to deal with a lost link, so that if you lose contact with your drone, you know how to react to that, how to reconnect to your drone, and continue your flight. They may simulate a lost link, either verbally or just by asking you some questions during your flight review. Similarly, you need to know who to call and how to act if your drone goes into a flyaway situation. In other words, you've lost control and it's disappearing. So the answer, by the way, is you contact any and all nearby aerodromes in the direction that you are flying. If it happens to be a flyaway that is going vertical instead of horizontally, you would need to call the Flight Information Center for your region. So you need to know how to contact those places for wherever it is in the country that you are. And in some cases, I would say this would be pretty rare, but maybe if your drone is flying towards a stadium or something like this full of people, you might need to call 911. So be aware of what you should do and have those aerodrome numbers perhaps pre-programmed into your checklists and things like that. Number 8. Well, most of us fly our drones in GPS mode, where you can pretty much rely on the drone staying right still and fighting against the wind all by itself. You should be prepared to fly in what's called, at least in the DJI space, the ATI mode. In other words, you are flying freely without GPS assistance, and you need to counteract the effect of wind and all the rest of that. In at least one situation that a colleague of mine encountered, they were asked to fly in ATTI mode. They weren't very well prepared. They'd never done that before, other than in maybe a very brief period of time, and they really struggled. So try it yourself. Turn off your GPS, figure out how to do that, and make sure that you can fly at least reasonably well in ATTI mode, so it's not your first time doing it on the test. Number 9, practice estimating approximate distances both horizontally and in altitude. You can fly your drone out, say 30 meters, and get a good handle on what it looks like at that distance, what sort of size it looks like, and that way, if and when your flight reviewer asks you in the middle of your flight, hey, how far do you think you are and how high do you think you are, you'll have maybe a little better chance of getting it reasonably correct. All right, it's the morning of your flight review and you're ready to go. What should you bring with you? A couple of things right off the top. You need to ensure you have personal identification that has your date of birth. So why that? Well, number 1, so that they can confirm that you are who you say you are, and number 2, to ensure that you've met the age requirements for advanced certification. So there's all sorts of different identification that has this. Perhaps the easiest would be your driver's license, your passport. You might have citizenship documentation, things like that are official government identification. Number 2, you need to have a few of your Transport Canada documents. Now, I would recommend hard copies only because, again, you're going to be nervous, you might be flustered, and finding them on your phone or on your laptop or something might just take too much time. So it's easy. Print off your documents and bring them with you. You need 3 things, and you need all 3 of them. You need your drone registration for whatever drone you're flying, because you bring your own drone to your flight review. You need your pilot certification, and remember, your pilot certification, even after you've passed your advanced operations exam, it will still say basic certification on it because you haven't passed that flight review yet. So bring that. And the third thing you need to bring is proof that you've actually passed the exam, the advanced operations exam. And again, you will have received a document that says what your exam results are and that you have passed. So bring, again, I would recommend a hard copy of those three documents with you. Number 3, bring those written procedures and checklists that you prepared a few minutes ago. And again, if you're using the Drone Pilot Canada app, you'll have those automatically right in your phone, so it's easy to have. Number 4, bring your instruction manual for your drone. If you recall back to the regulations, you're expected to have that on hand, so bring it to your flight review. I'm not sure that they'll actually ask you to show it, but better to have it than not to have it. And again, if you have the Drone Pilot Canada app and you've entered your drone into it, you'll have that instruction manual in a soft copy form very easily available to you. Number 5 is to have maps, charts, or again, the Drone Pilot Canada app, to indicate your knowledge of nearby aerodromes, controlled or restricted airspace, and other hazards. So make sure you have that material on hand, because you're bound to be asked, hey, where's the nearest aerodrome? Or what kind of airspace are you in right now? And of course, if you're not in controlled airspace or restricted airspace, don't forget that you're in Class G, as in general airspace, which is uncontrolled. Oh, and don't forget to bring your drone and charge its batteries, and bring the phone or tablet or whatever device you use when you're operating your drone, and make sure it's charged up as well. I almost forgot to mention that. A few other optional items you might want to bring with you. Well, okay, I couldn't resist saying the Drone Pilot Canada app, so for sure you'll have that. Number 2, a drone landing pad, either a homemade one or one of those fold-up ones you can get online. The reason I recommend that is, well, besides the fact that it's generally good practice to be on something nice and clean when you're taking off, but it also provides an easy way of saying, okay, I'm going to take off from my landing pad and I'm going to land either on it or close by. makes it an easy visual reference. Number 3, again, very optional, is to wear a safety vest. It's certainly not a requirement, but it's always a good idea, and it might show the flight reviewer that you have safety in mind, and wearing a safety vest will make you more visible. Number 4 is a controversial one, but I recommend it. Bring a fire extinguisher. Sure, you are very unlikely to ever need to use one, but it shows again that your mindset is safety oriented. So bring a fire extinguisher, ideally suited for LiPo batteries, but have it handy and you never know. And number 5, again, not likely to be used or expected that you have one, but having a first aid kit close at hand would be not a bad item to have with you. Again, it sort of emphasizes your safety-oriented mindset. Okay, so you've arrived at your flight review. What's going to happen? So, as a reminder, the focus here is to demonstrate your actual ability to fly safely. It's not a repeat of the extensive knowledge that you needed to know to get through that advanced exam. And also remember that when I say it's your ability to fly safely, it's not just according to what you might think is flying safely, but it's flying safely including following all of the procedural elements expected by Transport Canada. So following checklists, having procedures, and all that procedural stuff. The flight review itself, you should expect to be about an hour in duration, but only about 10 to 15 minutes of that will be actual flying time. The rest will be preparing for it, getting asked some questions, and the debrief afterwards. I'll get into those right now. So the first thing that's going to happen at your flight review is what I call the documentation check. They'll ask you to produce that personal identification with the date of birth on it that I mentioned that you should bring with you, so I hope you did. Second, they're going to do a similar sort of thing with your drone. So they're going to ask you to, or they'll look at themselves to make sure that the serial number on your drone matches that registration document that you have. So make sure it does, because that would be a terrible way to start your flight review, to have the wrong registration or have magically misread the serial number for your drone. And number 3, they're going to be checking that you have actually had a passing grade on the Advanced Operations Pilot exam. Number 2, and this is where we start to get into the drone stuff, they're going to have you go through a pre-flight check. And that will consist of a number of things, but certainly doing a site survey, which means demonstrating that you know where aerodromes are, what kind of airspace you are in, the distance from any bystanders who might be around, any ground hazards in the area where you're flying, like trees and overhead wires and cell phone towers and things like that. You're expected to know what the weather is like at the time, have access to that weather information. Of course, all of this stuff, well, other than distance from bystanders, is available in the Drone Pilot Canada app. Did I mention that's available? Sorry, I probably did. So your weather information you'll need to know, and you'll also need to check the NOTAMs, the Notice to Airmen, for the vicinity. And again, you can do that by clicking on the button on your app. The next part of the pre-flight check is to explain to the flight reviewer your mission plan. In other words, where you're going to take off from, the flight path you're going to follow to go to that tree that you're going to take a picture of, and your return and landing procedure. So you're going to come back, you're going to turn the aircraft around. By the way, you should always, and they might actually ask you to do this, when you are landing, you should always turn the aircraft away from you so that left on your joystick is actually moving the aircraft to the left, and so forth and so on. So just keep it pointed away from yourself, and it makes it certainly a lot easier. And the third part of your pre-flight check would be an aircraft check. So making sure that your battery's charged, that your props are secure and not damaged, your camera system is up and running, all of that good stuff. All of these are covered in other videos that I've produced in terms of pre-flight checks, and they are preloaded into the Drone Pilot Canada app. Check the link below. Number 3, the flight itself. So you'll be expected to demonstrate that you know how to fly your drone. So they're going to be checking that you know how to take off. And I've heard that they will ask you to take off manually as opposed to any sort of automated takeoff procedure on your phone. So doing the joystick diagonal maneuver, you're expected to know how to do that. Not sure why they ask you to do that, but in every case that I've heard, they are asking you for that. And once you've taken off and are hovering, maybe 6 feet off the ground, I would recommend that you do a control check that all your joysticks are working in the directions and amplitudes that you expect. Then you're expected to do a nice smooth flight path to complete your mission. So head off to that tree, circle around it or whatever you were going to do, take your pictures and come back. At some point in this mission, you might be interrupted, or they could ask you to do a separate flight, but it depends on the flight reviewer. So the flight reviewer will check your ability to navigate a requested path. So he could say, okay, I want you to fly to that corner of the field, then fly to the right to this next corner, come back to another corner of the field, or they could ask you to fly around a point of interest. Say there's maybe a barn or something like that. You could be asked to fly around that manually again, not using any sort of point of interest capability of your aircraft, but to be able to do that fairly easily. And again, at some point in your flight, they can ask you to estimate the distance and the altitude of your aircraft, and that's why practicing that in advance would be a great idea. And lastly, you'll be expected to be able to land pretty close to your designated landing site, hopefully without overshooting or running into anybody or heaven forbid, anything like that happens. And after you land, you'll be expected to log your flight in your flight log system, whether that be paper or the Excel spreadsheet or again in the Drone Pilot Canada app. And after landing, to check your aircraft for any damage or any anomalies or swelling batteries or things like that, and say as much of this sort of thing that you can do. Say it out loud. I am now taking my battery out and checking that it's not overly hot or swollen. I'm checking my propellers for damage, and they just verbalize your activities, and that will make you look like you're doing it in a much more professional fashion than if you just kind of stare at it and look around. All right. By the way, don't be afraid of making a minor mistake. Every flight reviewer is trained to realize that the candidates are very nervous. You'll be nervous, I'm sure of it. And that you could make a mistake. You could go left when you're meant to go right. You could go too high or too close to a tree or something like this. As long as you show your ability to recover from that, recognize that you made a mistake and deal with it appropriately, the flight reviewer will not fail your flight review. You will fail your flight review if you break any of the regulations. If you see a crowd of people and you say, let's look at what they're doing, that kind of stuff, you will definitely fail on the spot immediately if you break any of the regulations or do something incredibly unsafe or just act in a negligent fashion. So fly safely and you'll be absolutely fine. Number 4, and I mentioned this in the preparing section, be able to handle emergencies. Know how to contact Transport Canada if an incident occurs, and by an incident I mean if if somebody gets hurt somehow, or if you accidentally enter controlled airspace, or if you, heaven forbid, run into an aircraft or something like that. Have your Transport Canada contact number available and be able to explain that to the flight reviewer. And again, know how to deal with and how to recover from lost links, and know how to deal with flyaways. When you're dealing with a flyaway, you need to know your present location. So the drone is close to, whatever town you're in, the direction that it's flying, and when it leaves your control, so whether it's north, south, east, or west, the more accurate, the better, obviously, because that will determine what aerodromes or who to contact. You need to be able to estimate the remaining flight time. So if you look at your app and it says, okay, you've got 10 minutes of flight time left, there you go. That makes it very easy. And of course, you need to know who to call, whether it's the closest aerodrome or the Flight Information Center or 911 if it's heading in a terribly wrong direction. Last but not least, in your flight review, you will receive a debrief. And of course, that will hopefully be a pass, but it could be a fail. Let's face it. So you'll receive your passing or failing indicator. You'll be briefed on your strengths as a pilot. You did really well in that checklist, for example, and areas that require more practice. Even if you passed your flight review, I would expect your flight reviewer to indicate areas where you require more practice. For example, maybe you managed to land your aircraft in ADI mode, but he might say, you better be prepared for that day when you lose your GPS signal and you have to fly it home all on your own. And of course, you'll be told your next steps. So if you've passed, you'll still need to apply for that certification and give Transport Canada another $25. And if you've failed, they'll indicate how to re-register. You have to wait 24 hours to do another flight review, and your flight reviewer should be able to tell you the right steps to go through to do that. So that's what to expect at the flight review. I thought I'd round off this video with a few tips for getting through a flight review, sort of general tips. Number one is to think about it and prepare mentally like it's a driver's test or a job interview. It's going to be one-on-one. There's no undo button. There's no Google to save your butt. You just have to get through it and do it all on your own. Number two, arrive on time. It's nothing worse than starting off on a bad foot with a flight review or a job interview or whatever. Number three, behave professionally and courteously. They're going to try to put you at ease, and you should go along with that, of course, and try to relax and just go through this nicely. But be polite and professional. Think positively. Don't be afraid that you're going to lose. Be happy that you're going to succeed and get through this and have your woohoo moment at the end. Number five, don't show off. If your flight reviewer asks you how fast does your drone go, don't say, well, here, let me open her up and burn out of here. You would never do that on a driver's test. You'd never leave the parking lot burning rubber. So don't show off. And also don't cut corners. If you're going through the checklist and you're getting tired of it, just stick it out and go through all of the steps. And last but not least, if you do fail, and I hope you don't, listen carefully to the flight reviewer. Don't shut down. Listen carefully for what he or she has to say to you on how to succeed next time and what areas you need to work on. All right, that's the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed this and learned some things, and you're all ready and set to go and succeed at your flight review. Please like and subscribe to my videos, and comment below if you have anything to say, positive, negative, or in between. Thank you again for watching.